Hey everybody, my name is Dr. Scott Giacomucci. I'm a trauma therapist and educator in Pennsylvania. And in this video, I wanted to talk about the ways that past trauma can really disrupt our focus and concentration long after the trauma is over. I feel like this is an area that we probably don't talk about enough, although ADHD has become something that we're talking a lot more about. One of the things that I've noticed in my clinical practice is that many of the folks I work with seem to have been misdiagnosed with ADHD when really their difficulty with concentration and focus might be better explained by a PTSD diagnosis, post-traumatic stress disorder, and that the original person making a diagnosis maybe did not know about the trauma an individual experienced or simply wasn't as aware of how trauma can impact concentration. So in this video, I'm going to highlight some of the different ways that trauma can impact focus, concentration, and cognitive functioning. So one of the primary symptoms of PTSD is arousal, hyperarousal, hypervigilance, and reactivity. And so it makes sense that in the aftermath of something traumatic, our nervous system is going to be on edge, and we're going to be scanning the environment. We're going to be feeling unsafe. We're going to be doing whatever we can to try to protect ourselves. We're going to be looking over our shoulder. We're going to be activated or triggered by loud noises or, people coming up behind us, or we're not going to want to sit with our back to the door. There's lots of different ways that trauma can leave us feeling unsafe and focused on what's going on around us, constantly scanning the environment. We're trying to read people or what's going on. And this constant focus on what's going on around to try to protect ourselves can look a lot like ADHD. Other symptoms of trauma include dissociation or flashbacks or intrusive images. And if for someone that experiences dissociation or flashbacks, intrusive images, we're going to be really distracted when those symptoms and those defenses emerge for us. It's going to be really hard to focus on a task or focus in class or pay attention to someone that's talking to us if we're unconsciously resorting to dissociation to try to keep ourselves safe or to try to manage our anxiety. And again, this can look a lot like ADHD. If we're having intrusive images, it's going to disrupt our ability to be fully present in the here and now, in the moment. If we're struggling with anxiety or panic or phobias or prolonged stress from past trauma, it's going to disrupt our ability to focus and concentrate fully on what's going on in the moment. And so this difficulty in focusing on tasks, this difficulty in concentration can really have a snowball effect in that it can leave us feeling like something's wrong with us. It can disrupt our ability to sleep and get enough sleep. And then if we're not getting enough sleep or we're not getting enough nutrition because our body's on edge and then it's difficult to eat, it can impact our brain's functioning even further. Our brain's not getting enough rest or enough nutrition to function in a healthy way, the way that it's designed to function. And then that just leaves us more detached from our experience and more dissociative or more depressed or more on edge. And these symptoms can really fuel each other and make things worse and worse. If we're in a constant state of stress and hyperarousal, our body's constantly producing adrenaline and cortisol. Cortisol is the stress hormone. And when we experience that for prolonged periods of time or really intense periods, it impacts our brain's ability to store memories properly. It actually can prevent the hippocampus, which is the part of the brain that stores memory, from storing memory about what's happening. And this is particularly common with trauma, with crisis, and with dissociation. And so it can leave us really experiencing forgetfulness, which is going to, again, look a lot like ADHD or cognitive problems. This can impact and leave us struggling with decision making and problem solving. And it can impact us in learning. It can impact our relationships. It can impact us in school and work. It can leave us really struggling to follow through on tasks or plans that we set for ourselves. It can leave us feeling pretty frustrated with ourselves, frustrated with our brain, frustrated with our body, really self-critical. It can reduce our productivity at work or school, or our ability to follow through on goals that we set for ourselves. This difficulty with concentration and focus can really be disruptive in relationships, in that it can leave other people we're in relationship with feeling like they're unheard by us, that they have to constantly repeat themselves because we weren't paying attention when they said something, or they said something and we were preoccupied with something else because of our traumatic stress. Or they were trying to tell us about their day, but we were trying to make sense of our own experience in the moment. Or we were trying to navigate our own stress or anxiety and weren't able to store the memory about what they told us. So all of these are good reasons to really address this as best as we can, to seek support, to get help, to find a qualified professional that can help heal from trauma and change the way that trauma lives within us and is impacting our mind, our body, and our brains. So there are some simple things that we can do to try to improve our concentration and renegotiate the way that the past trauma might be impacting our concentration and focus. And many of these suggestions I'm going to give are really going to apply to anyone, whether you've experienced trauma or not. Some of these are really simple. Things like creating a structured and quiet place for yourself so that you can really regulate any difficult emotions or stress that are coming up, or almost like a secure base that you can come back to if you're feeling overwhelmed, kind of place to de-stress. A place that's really consistent and calm and quiet. If you're feeling overloaded by all the things happening in the world or happening in your life, a place that you can come back to and really take a couple deep breaths, maybe listen to quiet music or connect with a pet, or, relax and be with objects that are regulating for you. Another simple thing that you can do if you're overwhelmed by tasks and focus and concentration is take some of the things that you need to get done and really break them up into smaller tasks, really manageable, simple steps, and create a little to-do list for you or a big to-do list. Keep it really simple with reasonable deadlines so that you can stay on track and you can check off these boxes and feel a sense of accomplishment and success as you check off these boxes. This is something that can really keep you on track. Keep that to-do list somewhere nearby so you can reference it. You can be reminded of the things that need to get done. Sometimes it can even help to set a timer when you're creating time to focus on the things that need to get done. If you set a timer for 15 minutes and decide, I'm going to work and focus for 15 minutes as best as I can without looking at my phone, without allowing myself to be distracted by something else, that can create a container where the timer is going to go off and you're going to have a break in 15 minutes. And just for those 15 minutes, you can challenge yourself to focus, to concentrate. And you can experiment with, 5 minutes at a time, 10 minutes at a time, and gradually increase the length of the timer until you find, the maximum amount of time that it feels comfortable and okay for you to focus. And then take breaks. Taking breaks is important. Having breaks in between times of focus and concentration is only going to allow your mind to rest so that you can focus and concentrate more fully after the break. Taking deep breaths and practicing mindfulness and grounding exercises can really help with focus and concentration. Having social support and accountability can really help with concentration as well. Asking somebody to check in with you, or asking somebody even to sit next to you and quietly work with you side by side. Sometimes my wife and I will do this together, where we both have work that we need to get done, and we'll decide to sit with each other, in the evening, both next to each other on our laptops, and we'll agree not to distract each other. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And together we'll focus on the thing that we need to get done. And just being side by side with someone doing the same thing can be really helpful. Another thing to consider is avoid multitasking. If you're trying to juggle multiple things at the same time and focus on multiple things, it's going to be really hard to fully concentrate on one thing. And so if you can create that list I talked about earlier of all the things you're juggling, if they're on the list, then you don't have to worry about them for a moment. And you can just focus on one thing at a time and really give your full attention to that one thing as best as you can. Another thing to consider is how much time you're spending scrolling through social media or engaging in other tasks that might be training your brain to only focus on things for short periods of time. If you're spending hours and hours a day scrolling through Instagram or TikTok or YouTube, watching 10-second clips or 30-second clips, you might be unknowingly training your mind and your brain to only focus on things for 10 seconds or 30 seconds at a time. And so this is something to really look at. It's something that actually really concerns me about what we might be doing to our brains through social media consumption and TikTok and Instagram and YouTube, that it seems like our attention spans as a society are getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And there seems to be some correlation perhaps related to the introduction of social media into our lives in this way. There even was some research or speaker I heard who talked about television has changed so much that in the past, television shows and movies used to have much longer scenes, and you'd be focused on the same characters, the same setting for longer periods of time before the camera would shift to another scene. But nowadays, there's much shorter scenes and a lot more characters and moving pieces in the television shows and movies that we're watching. And I think people are spending less time reading and less time in environments where you're focused on one thing without distraction for long periods of time. And I think some of this is just caused by urbanization and spending more time in urban environments where there's lots of things going on and cars going by and loud noises and lots of people and less privacy and time in nature. But to some degree, all of us do have some control over at least how much time we're spending scrolling on social media. And this is something that we can change about our lives that could improve our focus and our concentration. And I'm not saying that you have to give up social media entirely, but spending less time on it or choosing to engage in social media platforms where there's longer focus on one thing, like a longer YouTube video versus a TikTok video, for example, could be helpful in this regard. In my own experience, one of the things I noticed years ago, I gave up television, and I didn't entirely give up social media, but I gave up scrolling for long periods of time on social media, and I disconnected myself from pop culture as much as I could by choice. I went 8 or 9 years without a television. And as soon as I did that, within a couple weeks, one of the things I started to notice is that my concentration improved significantly, that I was able to focus on complicated tasks for longer periods of time, and that there kind of was a snowball effect with that the longer I stayed disconnected from social media and television, the longer my attention span seemed to increase, and the more practice I had focusing on things for longer periods at a time, the longer my ability to focus on things for longer periods increased. So this is a thing to consider and experiment with and see if it might work for you as well. And then if some of this resonates for you around the connection between trauma and concentration and attention, I would encourage you to consider seeking professional support, trauma therapy and trauma support groups. If the concentration issues are being caused by trauma, then it makes sense to go and address the trauma and deal with the post-traumatic stress. And in doing so, it might start to alleviate some of the issues you're having with concentration or with focus. So I'd encourage you to pursue trauma therapy. Of course, medication can be helpful, especially if you are experiencing ADHD. You know that I have mixed feelings about medication, and many people do as well. And there's all sorts of problems with the pharmaceutical industry and psychiatry. And maybe I'll create a whole separate video about that. And for many people, medications can really be a game changer and really help increase our ability to focus and concentrate with some support. If we really are experiencing a chemical imbalance, makes sense that a medication, especially finding the right medication and the right dosage of that medication, which can take some time and some collaboration with a psychiatrist or with your primary care physician, can really be helpful. So I'd encourage you to experiment with some of these different suggestions. If you find any of this helpful, leave a comment in the video here. Let me know what was helpful. If there's something else that you do that you find helpful in increasing your concentration or focus, leave that in the comments as well so other people can learn from you. And if you found this video useful, I'd encourage you to like and subscribe to the channel so you get notified about future videos. My hope is that these videos will be helpful for anyone that's struggling with trauma or PTSD or CPTSD, as well as helpful for anyone that's any professionals that are supporting individuals that have experienced trauma.